Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Joanne. I have a whole variety of different subjects, and I've been following Melissa Caddick, and there's this lady called Sarah Steele, who's written a book, Do As I Say, and she's done a deep dive into why people follow cults. But she actually knew Melissa Caddick, and so it was meeting Melissa Caddick that she really understood why or how people become part of cults. So this is the article. Nobody knowingly joins a cult. So why are so many lives ruined by them? So nobody joins a cult is not a statement you would expect to hear from someone who has spent the last few years investigating how widespread they are. But at second glance, it goes to the heart of what Sarah Steele has repeatedly found as she transverses a secretive and bizarre world for her hit podcast, Let's Talk About Sex. Nice play on word, hey? No one thinks they're joining a cult, she says. The realization comes later, if at all. People like to think that it could never be you. But the more people I've spoken to, the more apparent it becomes that anyone could end up in a cult. That's because not all cults are made equal. While some preach religion, others prey on people's desires to make a difference in the world, whether it's presented as an organic farming commune or a platform to help less fortunate. So cults just aren't about religion, by the way. The type of people they attract are equally varied, according to Steele, who says the only thing members seem to have in common is that they found the group at the time when their life was in a flux or they were seeking change. You're not joining a cult, you're joining what looks like to be a really great group that you can dedicate yourself to for greater good or self-improvement or something as simple as martial arts class, she says. It can happen to anybody across the world, the wrong group at the wrong time. Many people will only ever hear about a handful of cults, often very sensationalistic reporting that focuses on the more kooky ones. So in Australia, the family was a doomsday cult founded in the 1960s, which she covered in the first episode of the podcast. Even after the death of the organisation's leader, Anne Hamilton Byrne, in 2019, few will be able to forget the photo of the 13 children standing in order of height, donning matching blue and pink outfits and bleached blonde bobs. Internationally, you may have heard of Heaven's Gate, the largest mass suicide event in the US, the Notorious Mason family, and Shuriken, a Japanese doomsday cult that launched a deadly sarin gas attack in the Tokyo subway in 1995. But beyond the headlines, Steele says many dangerous organizations continue to slip under the radar. A spreadsheet she uses to keep track of such groups currently includes 146 names that wouldn't even be taking a small chip of what's out there. The number of people you speak to that have had personal experience or have had a friend or family member who has been involved is just off the charts. It's way more than you would ever realize until you're having one of those conversations, she said. In her upcoming book, Do As I Say, Steele dives deeper into the motivations of people who join cults. And while there are a few similarities between those that become trapped, the tactics used to lure them come straight from a playbook. And now we're going to head into Melissa Caddick. Steele has good reason to believe we can all fall victim to manipulators. On top of her extensive interviews with cult survivors and experts, the Sydney-based filmmaker has experienced firsthand how easy it is to trust the wrong person. Melissa Caddick is now a household name after it was alleged she swindled millions of dollars from investors, often family and friends, while posing as a financial advisor. Her shock disappearance in 2020, the discovery of a severed foot in New South Wales coast months later, have spurred public interest in the case. But Steele knew Caddick as her long-term partner's cousin, to whom she had handed over her savings to invest. When the details of Caddick's ruse were revealed, she discovered she was among the victims. See? Going through something like that showed me how vulnerable we were to manipulative people, she said. It never occurred to me to question at all. Steele had been researching cults for years when the story broke, but says the realization she had been tricked still came as a shock. It opened my eyes to almost the banality of it all, she said, describing how long it took her to reconcile that she'd been conned. It doesn't happen the way you think it will. When it comes to cults, which can upsurge a person's entire identity. There's a lot more to unpack. It might start by thinking that there were just the people who were messed up, but the leader was good, or they had good aims but became corrupted over time. And then it starts to dawn on you that actually the whole thing is a massive manipulation and you've essentially been conned in a way. As part of her research, Steele set out her own criteria for what makes a cult. They have a charismatic leader or leadership group that closely controls members. The leaders or leaders believe they have exclusive access to the truth, and the group is highly secretive about their workings. Jana Lalich, a cult survivor and international expert on cults and coercion, has these elements in her list of common cult traits, including a group that has excessively zealous and unquestioning commitment to its leader, that regard their belief system ideologically and practices as the truth as law. Over the years, Steele has expanded her definition to take into account behaviours used to control members that are replicated across groups such as gaslighting and coercive control. I've come across groups which do have a leadership that's closely controlling, but that they don't necessarily have a leader. As an example, she points to the 2x2s, one of the many labels outsiders use to describe a religious sect that claims they don't have a name or a leader. Founded more than 100 years ago, the really secretive group operates throughout rural Australia, preaching beliefs that stem from the literal reading of the Bible. In a podcast episode dedicated to the group, former member Laurel McConnell describes the sect's belief as, in a nutshell, take everything you know about Christianity, then make it as conservative as you possibly can, and you're pretty close to what they believe in. Everything we share is done through word of mouth or preaching. There is no information written in books, for instance, which makes the group really difficult to examine and dissect. Even though the 2x2s meet only two of her criteria for a cult, Steele says it's important to define the group as such, because if you're not saying that the group is damaging in the way that it operates, then you're not talking about the phenomenon that I'm talking about. While 2x2s are in some ways an exception to the definition, Steele says it's striking how often the same types of structures and behaviours pop up in cults all over the globe. In the book, Steele lists some of these as an us and them mentality: exploitative, labour and intense schedules, and restricting access to professional help and media. The entire chapter is dedicated to coercive control and an insidious pattern of behaviour described to entrap, isolate and terrify victims. Often the practice is discussed in context of domestic and family violence, which state governments in New South Wales and Queensland recently to outlawing the behaviour. So this is her book, Do As I Say, How Cults Control, Why We Join Them, and What They Teach Us About Bullying, Abuse and Coercion. In cults, there are many ways this type of control plays out, often with the aim of getting people to do what you want. Love bombing, the act of overwhelming a new recruit with attention and adoration to inspire loyalty, is common. So too is gaslighting, referring to attempts to undermine someone else's sense of reality. Hot and cold treatment by leaders, whereby members are treated with love one minute and scorn the next, is common. This Steele writes can lead to trauma bonding, where members adjust their behaviours to get back into the leader's good side, to begin to blame themselves when they're mistreated. There are all these ways that they, the leaders, undermine people's self-confidence and have them second-guessing themselves. That keeps them entrapped in groups, she says. Steele would like to see coercive control laws targeted at domestic abuse expanded to include group settings, because they're the same tools that are used on a wider group of people. It's all the same stuff. It's controlling people and having them behave in ways that they wouldn't otherwise have, handing over their money, monitoring their communications, alienating them from family and friends, she says. Then people come out of these organisations and the cults won't take any responsibility for them because they shun anyone that leaves. And they have no help from society because people look at them and say, well, you chose to join. The victim blaming mentality once again parallels with the treatment of domestic and family violence survivors, who are time and time again asked, why didn't you just leave? Perhaps it's why many former cult members turn to psychologists experienced with domestic abuse, that there is a dearth of professionals with specific expertise in cults. For those that do take the step, leap and leave, the trauma can stay with them for decades to come. Steele says it's rare for former cult members to want to go to the police, but when they do, they're often told no crime has been committed. This lack of recourse, she says, is one of the toughest things for survivors to deal with. There's this concept that if you get out, then you're suddenly free and everything is great, Steele says. But there is so many people I'm in touch with that are really struggling, and there's very little help for them. So Do As I Say is published by Pan Macmillan Australia and is coming out on June 28. So I'm interested. I mean, this is a whole different perspective. This is a whole different perspective on this whole topic of cults. I think hopefully it's giving you a little bit more understanding. It does sound like a lot of ways it is like an abusive situation, like someone trying to get out of an abusive relationship. And remember, for these people to leave, they've actually got to give up everything to leave. So I hope that helps. Give you some food for thought. Do you know of any groups like that? I mean, there are a few YouTube channels that I would say that are sort of cult-like, particularly when they don't like their people talking on other topics, or they don't like having other people's links shared in their chats. All of that. When you start dictating how things are done or how things can be done, you're sort of heading into this track. Anyway, I'm interested to hear what you've got to say. My exam has just dropped, so I'm going to be busy for the next few hours, but let me know what you think in the comments below. I hope you continue to have a great day. Bye for now.